Okay, that's who we are and what we're doing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So on some level, I'm preaching to the choir. So stop me if I'm going too deep into things that we already know. Um, but we teach our kids to swim so they can stay safe around water. Why aren't we teaching them empowerment, self-defense so they can stay safe around people? Uh, and we actually teach our kids self-defense against a lot of things. Electricity. I don't think any one of my daughters would ever use her blow dryer in the shower. Like somehow they were taught that this is not safe. And we do this as parents all the time. How to safely cross the road, how to be safe drivers. But when it comes to negotiating relationships with people, we kind of miss out on many of the basic skills of how do I keep myself safe? How do I voice what's uncomfortable to me? How do I take the chance to set a boundary if I'm worried that there may be a physical repercussion? The person's going to get upset with me and hit me. And would I be able to set a verbal boundary if I don't know how to protect myself physically? So many times programs working with women and girls they have a disconnect between empowering them physically by, getting them into sports or, using their bodies in some way, shape, or another, and teaching them that it's okay to say I'm uncomfortable and I don't like how close you're standing and things. So we give them, on some level, we say you have permission to do this, but there's never this connect, or it's very rare that there's a connect between the verbal skills and the physical skills. And I believe that what's special, one of the things that's special about empowerment self-defense is it marries those two skills together. That I have physical skills to protect myself. I believe I have a right to protect myself, and I have the physical skills to back up someone who decides to not accept my boundaries and my and my wishes in the world. So I think that's the very special piece of empowerment self-defense that people aren't getting. And there's all sorts of history that's wrapped up in the self-defense movement and women's self-defense, because for many, many decades, women's self-defense was really either well-meaning men who said, oh, we know all these physical skills, we'll teach you how to poke eyes and use your keys between your fingers and all these other physical, we're ex-policemen and we're ex-martial artists, or we are martial artists and we want to get women into our schools, and we're going to teach you how to do this, who weren't necessarily attuned to the types of violence that women predominantly need to deal with, and also approach the whole conversation from a place of, you women need to be scared. You should be scared. And we're going to teach you how not to be scared anymore because you're going to be fierce. And that's not necessarily, first of all, I don't think it's what everybody wants. I like being fierce. That's a nice part of who I am. But I don't know if that's really what we want. We want people to be confident and capable. And recently I've found myself talking a lot about fight, flight, and freeze. Because fight, flight, and freeze are all natural, normal responses to fear, to stress, right? And we all get them when we're born. Yet, we have a culture that educates boys out of freeze and supercharges their fight, and does the opposite for girls. It entrenches them in freeze you can't do anything. Nothing you do will make it better. He'll always be stronger. He'll always, right? You don't have the capability of doing anything but freeze. And so we educate them out of fight and get them stuck deep in freeze. And I think it does both genders a disservice, because there are many times that we all know there are many times that it's a really good idea that I freeze, especially if I'm walking with my cell phone and not paying attention and my body just stops and I don't get hit by the bus. So freeze was a very good thing. And there are many people I know who would do better in life if they spent a little more time tapping into their freeze before they start screaming or start hitting or whatever it is. Just, okay, take that second to go, whoa, what's pushing my buttons right now? Same thing on the other side. Don't want to be stuck in freeze. You want to be able to move if there's an issue. How do we teach boys and girls equally that it's okay to freeze and it's okay to fight if you have to? And when do we use which and when do we use the other? And do we educate them with the tools that they need to make these decisions well? Okay. A lot of what has been learned over the years in the self-defense world, in the martial arts world, especially is a real understanding of what's the difference. So to me, in how I see this, is martial arts and all their friends, whether it's judo, karate, taekwondo, Krav Maga, or any of these other martial arts systems, were created by men for how men fight men. Empowerment self-defense, which grew up in the feminist movement, in the feminist martial arts women's movement, in the women's martial arts women's movement, all right, has been crafted by women who have both backgrounds in martial arts, but also in education and psychology and social work, who have analyzed the type of violence that women and girls deal with on a daily basis, not just the crazy guy in the park late at night, because we all know statistically that that's not the highest chance you're going to get of having a problem. And I'm talking about the whole spectrum from microaggressions, not respecting who I am, not giving me space to live, not allowing me to make decisions for myself, to actual abuse, rape, domestic abuse, and all of the murder, all of the things that take away my autonomy as a human being. So from an educational perspective, I feel like we've lost this connection with natural, with our instinct to protect ourselves. We educate girls out of fight and we supercharge boys into fight. We educate boys out of freeze and supercharge girls into freeze. And they both should be getting both of those skills equally. So we know that violence is a problem. It's an epidemic problem. There are less cases of AIDS. And we do more for AIDS than we do for sexual abuse. And that's got to change. It's time to change that. And I think that conversation is starting to happen. But I truly wish that the whole #MeToo generation, this period of time where we're tapping into coming to grips with, yeah, we've all been through this. Yeah, we've all had to deal with this. Yeah, we all have different levels of trauma. It doesn't become like a bad smell that after a couple of months or a year or two, we just go back to, filtering it out of our consciousness. I think we really have an opportunity here to say, yes, this is an issue. Yes, it's of epidemic proportions. And yes, there's what to do. And in order to do that, we need to figure out how to scale this. How do we get enough people trained, to be able to give the information over so that more people can get trained and give the information over and build a generation that has the tools to negotiate life from a much safer place. So there are statistics out there, and God willing, when ESD Global launches our online library, there will be access to the research that's out there that shows that what we're being fed, what women are being fed, that, you know, don't fight back, it'll just make it worse, is not true. That's not the reality. The reality is that they know that the majority, 75% of attacks, stop with yelling, running away if you can, and once, you know, the physically defending yourself, they say one strike. The research says one, that's enough. You know, saying, hey, I said stop, leave me alone, whack, go home. I've spent the last 5 years participating in the Committee for the Advancement of Women and Gender Equality at the Knesset in Israel. And only recently have I finally been able to define why I sit at the table. Because everybody, I'm not there just to talk about self-defense. I'm there to be the voice of women who don't want to be the statistic. So everybody else sitting around the table are fighting for the rights of women who are survivors. Survivors of domestic abuse, survivors of sexual assault, emotional abuse, whatever, but the committee focuses on fighting for the rights of survivors. And nobody fights for the rights of those who don't want to become survivors. Nobody talks about the other 2/3 who would like to stay in a growing population of people who don't become survivors. And even if they do, even if they end up in that pile, we also know that the healing process for women who've taken self-defense and yet have to come out the other end of a situation as a survivor of abuse, their healing is deeper and faster. And so there's something that's missing in the conversation. And I'm hoping that the more voices we can bring to the table to hear why we do what we do, the better chance we will have to make a bigger difference. So at El Alev in Israel, one of the things we've become very good at is we've created a system of inoculations. So we want to give, for every educational development stage, a piece of the picture, okay? So 5 to 7-year-olds cannot physically fight back in the same way that an 18-year-old can physically fight back. But there are things that we can teach 5 to 7-year-olds about how to be safe. So we also know that the younger a child is, the higher they are dependent on adults, and not necessarily adults that should be trusted. Many adults that they can trust, but not every adult should be trusted. And how do we give them the tools for understanding who is and who isn't? So a young child has a high level of dependence and a very low level of independence. And by the time they get to the end of high school, that's totally flipped. They have a very low level of dependence and a very high level of independence, to the point where they don't even listen to us anymore. And how do we create programs that allow them to stay connected to their internal voice? And here also, I'm going to bring in a little bit of research. There's research out there that says, if you ask girls, at what age do girls disconnect from their voice? At what age do they stop feeling like it's okay to say what they feel? And the age is 12. And when I heard that, I said to myself, oh my God, girls are disconnecting from their voice right at that place where they start developing intimate relationships, where they start talking about boyfriends or girlfriends, but having a relationship with someone they start being nervous or worried about, what is somebody going to think about what I feel about myself? What is somebody going to think about what I want? Are they going to laugh at me? Are they going to make fun of me? Are they going to, use it against me if I share something of my intimate feelings of what's going on in my life? And it, on some level, it feels like really small. I remember I raised 4 daughters, and I remember that period where you would say, well, what are you doing this afternoon? Oh, where are you going? Oh, who do you want to hang out with tonight? Oh, whose party are you going to? Oh, no, there was just no answer. And maybe part of it was because they wanted to hide stuff from me, or maybe it was because they just didn't feel confident sharing with me. But I saw it among themselves also. If I say something, somebody's going to laugh at me. So how do we get them to reconnect to their voice? And empowerment self-defense is all about connecting to your voice. So what if we gave an inoculation of empowerment self-defense at that 11 to 13-year-old age? Will we help girls stay connected with their voice, with their inner voice? What do I want? What does it mean to me? Am I allowed to have an opinion? I'd like to have an opinion. I'm going to state my opinion. And how will that change how they negotiate moving forward into intimate relationships? So, and then how we talk to, young adults is a little bit different than how we talk to adults and parents, and giving tools to adults and parents are giving tools to how to bring it back down and talk about it with your kids, and getting this as part of an educational cycle that is all about our rights to be safe in this world and the tools we need to do so. So LLEV in Israel, aside from building the system of inoculations, like, we're doing something right. Somehow we have been able to, in a very tiny little country, today we have approximately 40 instructors, and these are 40 female instructors who the majority are in the childbearing ages. So I've got something like 5% to 10% of my staff going in and out of maternity leave at any point in time. And yet we have been able to get a national reach of 65 cities in Israel that we work with. We've established ties with a huge amount of organizations, whether they're schools or organizations that work with women and girls. In 2017, we gave 550 classes, workshops, and other activities. 3,500 hours of instruction, and the worked with community participant initiatives are things that grow from the ground. This is one mom calling from one community and saying, I want this in my community. And then she brings together 10 friends, and they put a class together with or without an organization to support them. So this feeling that it's bubbling up from here. It's not just us convincing people you need this, but we've created this bubble from the community of saying, I don't want my kid getting into high school without having these tools, and I'm going to make sure this happens. Or I never had this as a kid, and I need it now, and I want it now, and I'm going to make sure my friends get it too. So I think that's a very special achievement that LLEV has been able to make. And then how do we take that and say, we know we have some special sauce here. We know that we're packaging something well. How do we help scale this and have it happen in Costa Rica and Venezuela and Canada and all over the world by planting seeds of women who can hold the beginning of the bubble in their communities and grow it. And I think that's what ESD Global hopes to be, is this umbrella organization that can help do that. So where are we right now? Last summer, I got together some of the best and the brightest, took them to a camp in upstate New York. We were 15 women who had 2 to 4 decades of experience in empowerment self-defense. And I said to them, I know that you have all been marching in the mud like all of us and banging your head on walls. None of us sitting in this room can say we have too much funding, too many students, and too many people who want to train to become instructors. Like this, we are all stuck with the same issues. I'm alone. What's going to happen when I no longer can do this? I've affected a little bit of change. Why haven't I been able to affect more change? And I said, okay, I want you to let go of all of that. I want you to get on the bus of dreaming with me. And what would you want in a perfect world? What do you think could help us scale this and make this sustainable? So we came up with three major action items. One is to continue doing camp, because we did camp last summer, and I'll talk a little bit about camp, and that it was phenomenal process, and the women who graduated from camp or finished the program have already been able to implement a lot of what they're doing and really make change in their community. We're going to create an organization that can become an umbrella, and their first job is going to be to start setting up an online library for empowerment self-defense practitioners, where they can share curriculum, they can share stories, they can reach out to a mentor and get live help on, I'm stuck, I have a group that I just can't get them to whatever, and get feedback from, and research that will help them talk to their communities about why they should be doing this. So many of us have some understanding of how to read a research report, but the majority of us don't. And if you throw them a 500-page thesis on why this works, why teaching girls to step into their power makes a difference and everything, they want the headlights. I want the highlights. Give me some points that I can talk about and point people in that direction and say, hey, here's the link to. So how do we make that accessible to them? And how do we work together to build a database of surveys? We build a survey. You give it before giving a class. You give it after giving a class. You ask your students, would you like to be part of a follow-up? 6 months later, they get another survey sent to them, and a year after that, or 5 years after that, they get another survey sent to them. That's all part of a system of collecting data on, does this really work? So that's the library piece. We talked about professional development. That's how do we plant a seed, give a woman the tools to start learning how to be an empowerment self-defense teacher, and then giving her the support she needs to do that and make it sustainable in her community. And how do we also help make that connection between her and the community in a way that they understand what they're getting. So like we can also help with making that conversation happen. And then the third piece was, well, you know what? We're not the only ones doing empowerment self-defense. There are a lot of people out there who've developed programs that look like self-defense and smell like self-defense and sound like self-defense and have all of the pieces of self-defense. How do we put them together under the umbrella? So one of the tasks was to build an assessment piece. Test that you go online, you fill in a questionnaire, randomized questions of about 100, it's a bank of 150, you get 100, you have to sit down and put the time into filling it out. And at the end of that, we get a score. And based on that score, first of all, I learned something no matter what the score is. I learned that this person cared enough to sit and put the time and the energy into filling out that assessment. So if they score high on the scale, I say, hey, awesome. You're a friend, you're good, you're a colleague, you're a practitioner like us, come join the movement. And if they're low on the scale, I say to them, wow, you really have some passion around this. Let's see what we can get you to learn more about how to align with us. And how do we pull them into that process of aligning? You've got the passion. Now we got to figure out how to help you align. And then there are the people in the middle where, okay, you didn't quite score high enough that we would say, you know, you're one of us. But how can we help you fill in what you're missing? Is what you're missing inclusivity? Is what you're missing being trauma informed? Is what you're missing, you do all of the emotional stuff, but you really don't do the physical pieces? Like you don't have that piece down yet, you know, on how to do the more, whatever advanced physically things that we feel are necessary to have as a basic teacher, or certainly as a school teaching this. And how can we help you get that? So that's the assessment piece. So what we came out was 3 actionable items. Is we're going to set up an organization that's going to run camp, build an assessment piece, and set up an online library so that we can share resources. And I've been thrilled to have the teams working to do this. The assessment team, we've got Dr. Martha Thompson and Dr. Jocelyn Hollander and Joanne Factor, Joanne Factor was the certification for NWMAF, the National Women's Martial Arts Federation does a certification for self-defense instructors. So she ran that for many years for on the board of that. And there's one more person, Martha, Jocelyn, Joanne, and Amy Jones from Thousand Waves in Chicago, who's the current NWMAF self-defense certification program. So that was our 4 for the team on that. I'm thrilled to be working with them. And I see that Matt just joined us. He's one of our fellows in residence who is helping us. Hey, Matt, who's helping us with building the library and putting together the research pieces that we would like to share with the world in a way that's palatable for people who don't normally read research papers. So going in a little deeper, professional development, run the training camp mentorship, and some sort of what we were calling a mobile training unit. So I think in the empowerment self-defense world, my biggest dream is to get the city of Jerusalem to say, we want this in every school. It's also my biggest nightmare. Because if I get them to say that, that means I got to figure out how to deliver it. And that fear of, oh my God, what if I got Philadelphia to say this has to be in the school system? How do I scale that? So what if we said, okay, your job is to recruit 20 women, 30 women who can do a 2-week training, full time, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. We will send you a team of teacher instructors, and we're going to get them started for building teaching that first level platform for that specific group that wants it. They can't color outside the lines. They can't create their own programs, but they're going to learn how to deliver a specific self-defense piece, empowerment self-defense piece that's appropriate for the organization that just said, we want you and we want you big. And then we will support you growing them, giving them more tools, helping that grow, getting them involved in the community, having that, really become a based process in your community. And we can do that. Community outreach, networking, so many of us are so burnt out by being the only one who's doing this where we are. And we hear this over and over again. I've been trying, I'm not getting aware, I don't know what to do, I can't I can't train, whatever. I'm disconnected. So how do we build the community of ESD practitioners? And not just a community. I think that up until now, there's this fight between everybody can call themselves a self-defense teacher, and there are many people who do, no matter what, and what it is to be a real practitioner, that this is your profession. So how did massage therapists go through that process? At one point in time, Nobody was licensed. Everybody gave massages and could call themselves massage therapists or physical therapists or acupuncturists. I would not want to go to an acupuncturist who was not licensed. So now that's clear that that has to happen. That in order to know that you've got a professional, they have to have some sort of accreditation. And we've yet to figure out how to do that in empowerment self-defense, and I think that's something that must happen. Library I talked about. Biggest problem most of us have is how do we get fundraising? How do we be able to give scholarships? Because we all know that everybody deserves these tools and not everybody can afford them. So how do you set up a program that allows you to run your programs with program income and yet still be able to offer programs to people who cannot afford them? When I became the CEO of LLEV in 2010, 95% of our yearly budget was covered by a donation. That donation has not changed since 2010. In general, it's more or less the same size, but program income now covers 60% of our yearly budget. So our budget grew tremendously, still getting the same amount of seed funding every year, but we have now added another almost 2 million shekels, 1.5 million shekels of program income that says, okay, if you can afford it, you need to pay for it. If you really can afford it, why don't you support somebody else who can't? Right? So we work with Cisco and Microsoft, and we've done programs for real organizations who we charge them 100% plus and say that little bit of plus is going to go back to the community so that we can offer things. And how did we build that business plan? And then how do we bring research, do research in a way that it's publishable? Because bottom line is, if you can't publish it, it doesn't count. And we all know this. Camp. So our exciting thing is we have a May 1st deadline for applications for 30 spots at camp, and we already have over 30 applications. So super exciting. And from all over, and I'll talk about them a little bit. So now, some of the people who've come to us are coming from, I'll give you, I'm going to go back a second, okay? Last year, when we sent out the call for interest in a camp, the minimum requirement to apply was a martial arts background, any martial arts background, and a desire to learn how to teach this. And our scholarshiping was one person per area, because we believe that if we plant a seed and then nurture that seed, they will be able to create more plants and build a nice, pretty garden with all the things that they need. So we had 3 women from North Dakota apply to camp, and they didn't have a martial arts background. They were just impact graduates. They had done one impact class. One of them had done it almost 10 years ago and had been trying for 10 years to get that martial arts background, could not find anything in her area that was appropriate for women to train. Had 2 friends who then did the impact class at some point while they were in college, came back to live on the reservation that they live on. And they said, we need to bring this here. We have to bring this here. How do we do this? And when they applied, I said, well, you know, we have to deal with this. How do we involve women who can't get a martial arts background? And does that have to be does that have to be a criteria? That, you know, there are plenty of programs that have been based on non-martial artists that do very well. What if we gave them enough support? So I said to them, you know, I'm going to take 3 for the price of 1, hope that each one of them learns a third of the material, and they're going to go home and work on it together, and we're going to just let them incubate this all together and work together. And the honest truth is it's working, because they're now training to become an impact chapter. They're also just starting an empowerment self-defense program that's non-impact. And last night I got a WhatsApp from one of them saying, how do you play that noodles game again? You know, do we step forward? Do you step back? You know, it was like, awesome. That's the point of having a mentor, is that you can just send them a little WhatsApp and go, just remind me. Well, I have to talk about this game. I remember how to teach it, but I want to remember how you talked about it. What was it about? So you hit each other with, you know, pool noodles, and they move forward, they move back, and you feel what feels better, what feels more empowering, what works better. And I said, well, you know, but it's really about life. You know, it's not about, you know, move in order to get away, which is a concept in self-defense. Sometimes you have to move in order to get away. But life's going to slap you around, you know, and are you going to go through life going, ooh, this hurts? Or are you going to go, hey, I got this, I can do this, and I'm going to move forward into it. So the messaging of the empowerment self-defense, how we bring it to them, I think is very special, and they want to make sure they're getting that messaging correctly. So this is specifically, you know, one woman who's applying and said, this is what I'm doing. She's doing a master's program at the moment at the University for Peace in Costa Rica. She was in an empowerment self-defense class run by a graduate of last year's program. If I'm not mistaken, we have about either 5 or 6 applications. We may actually have more. Ellen, do we have more than that? Nah, coming from that program in, we have more than 6 applicants coming from this master's program for peace education, who want to come to camp and get the skills to help women step into their power, to reclaim their voices, and to move through their communities in a way where they feel safe. And we hear the same things over. Deep sense of power. I took the course. I have a deep sense of power. See, this is a crucial need. I can bring it to wherever I work in the conflict. Wherever I work in conflict, I can bring this. I want to be able to give the women I work with more than my own tears, a hug or a reference for a safe place and legal help. I want to give them real, tangible, powerful tools that they can personally use to combat the violence they face in private and public spaces. That's huge. These are our Turtle Mountain ladies breaking boards at the end of camp last year. I just had to put that in there. And they know that this is what's needed. So, as of the moment, we have applications from Kenya, Myanmar, Burma, Southern India, Canada, Costa Rica, Estonia, Venezuela, Slovenia, Japan, the United States, a whole bunch of different places, and the Netherlands. And that's super, super exciting. Another piece of camp, which we are trying to promote right now, and I had hoped that I would get more of this population popping up on the call, and unfortunately I have not succeeded in that, is how do we bring together women from the women's movement to taste what empowerment self-defense tastes like, so that we can get that bad taste out of their mouth of it's victim blaming, it doesn't work, you know, it's going to make it worse, and all of that stuff, that we can really address the things that stop them from incorporating these programs into the organizations that they work with, funding these programs. There is a lot of funding out there right now for women's led programs, and it's not going to this. November of 2015, the European Union released a meta-analysis on, they looked at 50 different research projects for violence prevention. And they looked at what worked and what didn't work. And their conclusion was that the most effective violence prevention protocol was empowerment self-defense. Yet, it is not just the least funded, it's usually not even a line on the budget. and that has to change. And I believe we've come to the point where it's time to change that. And I believe there's enough out there saying that there's reason to change that, and that we can change it. And that's what we're doing at ESD Global. We can certainly unmute people and turn this into a conversation, because I think that would make the most sense at the moment.
So I have unmuted. I invite other people to unmute. And does anybody have questions for you, Deet?
Yes, actually I do. When I noticed early on in the when you had the different age ranges, you know, the children, the
teens, tweens,
the adults. When you look at adulthood, do you break down the adults into sort of different age groups? Because I know the way that one would approach teaching 30-year-old is going to be vastly different from when you're working with a 65 or 70-year-old. So
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So we actually have there are 3 populations that LLEV works with co-ed. 4. The LGBT community, we work co-ed. Children, we work co-ed.
right.
The elderly, we work co-ed. Because honestly, a 65-year-old woman has developed a lifetime of tools to deal with violence, and the men haven't. The men have walked through life thinking they could take care of themselves. And all of a sudden, a little light bulb goes on, and they're like, oh my God, that group of 4 25-year-old, 28-year-old huge guys coming towards me might not have the best intentions. And for the first time in their lives, they are connecting with this living in fear. And it's very, very traumatic for many of them. I no longer can run. I no longer can fight. I no longer have this. And women are like, yeah, well, you know, I just lie, you know. So I'll just say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I left my wallet over there. Just could you go get it for me? Bye. You know, like women at that age have already developed tools for dealing with so many of the microaggressions and the little fears, or, you know, I don't go out at night, or you know, if it's raining, I'm not going to go to the, you know, whatever's happening at the community center, which is a pity. So yeah, that's one of the populations. And people with disabilities, we also do co-ed, because again, they have the same vulnerabilities, male and female, and they need the skills equally. You know, I also believe that men need the skills also, and I know Matthew agrees with me on this, on how do we engage men in healing what's going on in manlyhood, you know, in masculinity. Yeah, by the way, I don't speak English. I've learned so much Hebrew that I became biliterate, not bilingual. So if I can't find a word, it's because I'm just not manly. Yes, masculinity. There's a real word for that. One of the advisors for LLEV is a doctor of the male gender. He did his doctorate in male studies instead of women's studies, men's studies. And he says, you know, for every girl that's sexually harassed, there are 15 boys getting slapped around by their friends, by their peers. You know, so it may be different type of violence, but there's so much violence going on among boys also. And if you think about it, how hard is it for a girl to say I was sexually assaulted or sexually harassed? It's even harder for the boys to say it. So you know, to have a clean and whole and healthy, safe world, we have to deal with the issue across the board. And I believe that, you know, between Matt and I standing in front of a group of women, if he tells the group of women, hey, you know, you can fight back and win the fight, and there's no other woman doing that, and, you know, it's a little harder for me to believe him, whereas it's easier for people, for women to believe me. Same thing with the boys. If I go into a group of boys and say to them, it's okay to be in touch with your feelings. It's okay for you to cry if you're upset and you're whatever, and you don't always have to fight. They're gonna like go, who are you? And like, why are you feeding me this crap? But if he says it, and he says, yeah, and you know what? If I have to fight, I don't want to choose to fight, but if I have to fight, yeah, I'm gonna fight to protect myself. But I'm so glad you shared that story with me. That's horrible. Nobody should treat you like that. How can I help you? A man teaching the boys that, it is so much more powerful. And we see that in the programs that we've done for boys. So, and that's a big reason why we call this empowerment self-defense and not women's self-defense or feminist self-defense, that it's time to let go of that and say, you did what you needed to do to get us to today. But if we really want to heal this world, we need to heal this world for both genders. And I believe that women should be leading it, because we have the most experience in what it's like to walk through life scared. So, did that help?
Yes.
How did classes go with your youngest set of students? Like, what was the youngest set of students you've done these classes with?
So we do the youngest group we do is 5-year-olds, and we do it with a parent or a responsible adult. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a parent, because part of it's about building that conversation, that it's okay to talk about the icky things. And if I am the responsible adult and somebody comes to tell me a story, I'm not going to sit there on my computer going, no, not now, sweetheart, not now, sweetheart. But that I have the tools and understanding that if they come to me and say, hey, it's a kid pack thing, I stop everything. Like, we teach them the code words for getting your parents' attention, you know, and parent knowing that, yes, if you say that, I am there for you fully. And how do we do that? And we also do parents and girls together at that 11 to 13-year-old age too, because again, we want to open that that line of conversation between the moms and the girls who are uncomfortable talking about these things, you know, and how do we keep that comfortable going forward?
How young have you seen the conversation of boundaries work? Like, like a 5-year-old in a class, like, are they understanding, you know, these are my boundaries, those are your boundaries, that kind of conversation is going well? Or are you finding that they're too young? Or what age do you find that the conversation of boundaries is clicking?
So we've gotten a lot of feedback from parents, some of it good and some of it bad. You know, we have to like help them, because they'll have kids saying, yes, but it's my body and I don't want to take a shower.
Well, yeah.
Right. So, so are they getting that they have a right to make decisions about their bodies? And yes. So yes. We also have had some success stories, you know. So we had a couple of kids whose the father had taken them to the park on the weekend and to play, and the baby, who was about 1.5 years, fell asleep. So it was a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. I think the older one was a girl and a boy. And he said, look, we're going to walk home now. It's only 2 blocks, and I'm going to walk quickly because I am holding the baby and he's fast asleep. But you know how to go, and you know, there's nothing across, just right behind me. So he walked off, and they got home and they said, well, you know, when you turn the corner, well, a guy stopped us and said he had puppies, and you know, did we want to come and see the puppies? And he wasn't a stranger, because he comes to the park a lot of times, and I see him in the park a lot of times. So I wasn't scared of him, but I knew that we don't go where we're not supposed to go. So like, they get it. And they too, and then there was a grab me he did try to grab one of the kids, and they just started kicking and making a fuss. He let go, and it was over, and they came home and told the story.
Mhm.
All of the exciting things that we want to hear when it happens.
Right.
That our programs make a difference.
Oh, good. Good.
Though
Well,
my
thank you
favorite
for this.
success
We're
story-
just in the middle of organizing our workshop for the beginning of May, so I'm going to have to tap out because I've got some catering issues I have to deal with. But I wanted to thank you, and I'm going to be reporting back to Dr. Sen later this week.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you
I'm
so
so glad
much.
you were able to join us.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay, so
The
now
rest
we
of
know
us
why
are
we had
you.
to. No. I did. Now we know why we had to do this tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking up Dr. Sen. She's sort of impressive.
Oh yeah, no, that's Charlene Sen. She's the one who did the major research on this. Like, yes, that was the reason why this had to happen tonight. Woohoo!
Thank you, Eugene. I always learn so much. It is always so inspiring. And you seem like a wind-up Energizer bunny. It's like, choo, choo, choo. ESD.
Love seeing y'all. May the force be with us.